Yeah, for MS Teams, and then you can use it. And I know that, Katie, that you appreciate questions and remarks, and you don't like one-way communication. But it's difficult to organize that in such a session, but we will try it. Yeah. And when there are questions in the chat function, then I will pass the questions and remarks to you, Katie. Yes. And so I function as moderator of this session. The masterclass will take about 1.5 hours. Yeah. There are some interactive elements, I know. Yes. Katie's experimenting with it. But I hope that we all have also time at the end of the masterclass to create a little bit more discussion. Yes. And it's possible in MS Teams to raise your hand in MS Teams, which indicates that you want to say something. And it's my task then to give you the floor, but I don't promise. It's a challenge. Well, most attendees of this masterclass will have read about you. Mm-hmm. They know that you are an experienced lean coach, and you've done a lot of things, many things. You will introduce yourself. More within a moment. Yeah. Hello, Marielle. Perhaps you can turn off the video. Is that possible? Yeah, there are about 100 people joining, so it's a little bit too much. Everybody has the video. Yes. Okay. Well, you will introduce yourself more, but I want to say something about your last achievement. Since more than a month, it is possible for all of us to read an interesting book you have written. Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn. Yes, that's it. It's a beautiful book. And the focus of the book is on learning. Learning at the Toyota company, and it describes how Isao Yoshino, who was 40 years manager at the company, has been immersed in the learning culture of the company. And there are many, many beautiful stories in the book from which we can learn. Within 1 month, the book became the #1 release of management books at Amazon. And I think that's an enormous achievement. It's fantastic. And I think it's something for you and for Isao Yoshino to be proud of. Thank you. And I'm sure that the book will remain popular, and many people in companies will read it together in groups or whatever. It's a very insightful book. Katie, so far my introduction. I want to give you the floor. But first of all, I want to ask Gerda to turn off the video. Okay. Okay. Well, the floor is yours, Katie.
Well, great. Thank you, Jannes, and thank you for inviting me to be here. As some of you know, this would have been my 4th year of coming out to the Netherlands to be at Han University as a guest, and unfortunately, with coronavirus, all plans for 2020 changed. But I'm really thrilled to be here to speak with you all. And when we originally conceived this masterclass, we had thought that we might be able to have some more interactive like breakout sessions, but due to technology and the number of people that were interested in coming, we've pivoted a bit. So I'm going to be experimenting a bit today with using ManyMentor to be asking some questions for you and getting some input. And the thing to me that's really important or valuable about having live sessions opposed to something recorded is the interaction and engagement. So I really do want to have questions and have some discussion with you. So please put questions in chat. We'll probably do more questions at the end and have some interaction and dialogue. But I will be asking you throughout to be practicing some elements of self-reflection. So be prepared for doing some self-reflection and then sharing either in the ManyMentor or in the chat, depending on the situation of for yourself. So I usually use Zoom, so I'm a little bit new to Microsoft Teams. So I am hoping that I do okay. Oh, this control. Okay, open system preferences. It's making me. I am sorry. It's making me put. Oh, this is not good. To be able to share my screen. We did not. This was not a problem before. All right, one moment. Sorry, guys. I don't know why Microsoft Teams is not allowing me to share. Are you seeing, Jannes, are you seeing any screen, or is it allowing? Apologies, guys. We did test this, and I don't know why we're having any challenge.
I see your screen. Oh.
You see my screen? Okay.
Yeah,
You saw my screen? You saw my screen. Okay. And did you see my did you see my PowerPoint slides?
Yes, if you put it on presenter mode, then it will work.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, good. It was telling me that I had to open system preferences, so I was a little worried about that. Okay, so you see my slides. Are we good? Yes?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. So sorry, thank you for the technical difficulties. One of the, I think, the challenges and opportunities for all of us is the different platforms and getting familiar and comfortable using all that. So again, thank you, Jannes, for the introduction. For those of you who don't know me, and I know many of you personally, we've met over the past few years when I've either been in the Netherlands, and at least one of you has been in Japan with me. I know who is here. But I'm Katie Anderson. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area. I, many years ago, was an internal lean consultant, primarily in healthcare. I worked for 2 different healthcare organizations, and then in the San Francisco Bay Area, after a career in healthcare policy and a whole nother in research and academia. So that academia and research is actually my background, and something that came to benefit me when writing this book and documenting Mr. Yoshino's journey of learning and leading over a lifetime. But I have really come to appreciate that my intention and my purpose is helping people around the world to live and lead with intention. And I'm going to talk to you today about what that concept means and how we as leaders and as coaches and as people can be better leaders and better helpers in supporting the development of other people and creating learning. And that really ties into the title of this book. We're sort of always in this constant cycle of both learning to lead and leading to help other people learn as well. So my purpose for today's masterclass is to not only share some concepts from the book with Mr. Yoshino and some of his stories, but also have an opportunity for you to reflect and learn and start practicing some of these concepts for yourself, so that when you leave our session in about 80 minutes, that you have something tangible that you want to work on to improve for yourself. So first, we're going to do a Mentimeter poll, and again, this is a bit of, I've done these in live in-person sessions, but not having to go back and forth on my screen. But first, we have 2 questions for you. So go to menti.com and then write down this code. This is the code you will be using for the whole session for doing the interactive polls. So 8185423. And I'm going to have to close out of my slide here and go here, and then I think yes. So start answering that first question, and we're just curious. This is an opportunity. Normally, I would go around the room and ask where people are from. I'm guessing most of you are from the Netherlands, though I do know that we shared this with some others. Oh, great! So great. Keep coming in and voting there. And then there will be a second question, which is what best describes your professional role? Senior executive, business owner, middle or senior management, frontline management, independent contributor, an internal process improvement, lean operational excellence coach, an external coach or consultant, student, professor, lecturer, educator, or other. So we'll give a few moments to get to know who's on our call today. Let me go back here. Okay. Great. Well, I'll talk a little bit more about, I'll share some pictures in a moment, but for those of you who don't know my story, how this book came to be was quite a bit of serendipity. 6 years ago, my family had I just started my own consulting practice less than a year before, and had just had my second child, and I was at a conference with my mentor and coach, and in Los Angeles, in Long Beach. And we had just found out for my husband's job that he had had an opportunity for us to move to Tokyo. And I was really thrilled. So it looks like there are a lot of process improvement, internal and external coaches. Well, that was my role, both as internal and then external. And I had been practicing Lean for about a decade at that point. And I was really excited to have the opportunity to go to Japan and learn Lean from the source, to learn in Toyota and all of the roots that really have influenced the development of the Toyota way. Well, serendipity would have it that Mr. Isao Yoshino, who was John Shook's first boss when John Shook was the first non-Japanese employee of Toyota Motor Corporation back in the 1980s, was at the conference. And he and Mr. Yoshino were on stage talking about their role as boss and subordinate, as they called it there. And Mr. Yoshino gave me his card and said, when you move to Japan, look me up. So this picture here is actually a photo of the very first time I met up with Mr. Yoshino in Japan. And I made my husband, who is the man on the right, take the day off of work, because I really did think this was going to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to talk to this Toyota sensei and learn from him. And it became really the beginning of one of the most impactful relationships that I've developed in my adult life. And, and Jannes too, who we met a few years later and now have been working with and partnering with. So I really appreciate Jannes and everyone at Han for really supporting Mr. Yoshino and me, for sharing our experiences around the world as well. So what started off as first just a few conversations, and I would jump on the bullet train and jet down, or not jet, but zip on down in 90 minutes from Tokyo to Nagoya, where Mr. Yoshino would pick me up, or I would, in a rented Toyota, of course, or I would take a taxi to his office, and we'd spend the day together. And I had started writing a blog about my experiences as a Lean practitioner living in Japan and everything I was learning and discovering. And he gave me permission at that point to write about our conversations. And that was the beginning of what later became an idea for writing a book, and is what resulted in our book here today that's come out. So I'm really, really thrilled. This was a much bigger undertaking than I ever anticipated. I'd written an undergraduate and a master's thesis. This is at least as many words, if not more, but capturing somebody's learning journey and experience was so impactful for me, and I learned so much. But what I really appreciated and got the most value from was the fact that I was helping Mr. Yoshino learn and reflect about his life. And he made this comment that really was quite meaningful to me when he said, I am learning and relearning more about my life, and that he's understanding things more deeply now than he even understood then. And I really think this speaks to sort of the meta story, the higher level message of the book, which is about reflection and hansei. The Japanese word for self-reflection is hansei. Actually, the original working title of the book was Practicing Hansei, but for a variety of reasons, I chose to focus more on the actual meaning or the experience of learning from the book, which is about learning and leading. And how reflection is really the beginning of learning and not the end. You know, we always talk about plan, do, study, adjust, or plan, do, check, act cycles, but we shouldn't be starting with planning. We should be really starting with the studying, the checking, and the adjusting, because it's the learning that allows us then to make changes and to adjust. So through the course of today, I want you to reflect for yourself on your own experiences and how you can be thinking about what adjustments might you need to make to become a more intentional, people-centered leader or better coach developing a culture of learning in your organizations. And particularly for those of you either in operational leadership roles or in a role called coach, this is really, really important. And again, when we look back and see things in different contexts, we can learn afresh. And one of the things that many people have been commenting to me about is that what's refreshing is this book is not just about the successes at Toyota or a leader's success, but it's really about the failures and the mistakes and the learning from that. And I have to give so much credit to Mr. Yoshino for his humility and his willingness to take a look at things that were harder for him to look back on, and even some very big failures and challenging times in his life. And how can we have a mindset of learning that even failures or challenging times can be an opportunity for rich learning and changing? And for those of you who know me, you know by now how much I love Japanese Daruma dolls. This is this paper mache figurine here. I have one in my office, and this is a big one. And you fill in the left eye when you have a goal. But what's really important about these dolls, and I didn't know when I first learned of them when my children were in preschool and I saw them for the first time, was that they're weighted at the bottom. So if it topples down, it kind of comes back up. And there's this Japanese saying about fall down 7 times, get up 8. And how we can have goals are very important, but it's about knowing how to persevere, how to get up, how to learn from failure. And I really think that this phrase shows so much of the spirit that Mr. Yoshino has incorporated into his life and has been so reflective in learning, for helping us learn as well. I also want to share with you this concept of intention. And I'm not a lean practitioner who is super tied into Japanese words being used. I think sometimes we can get too caught into language and it can be distracting. But here I was actually living in Japan, and so it made some sense. I did not have any business cards, and so I told, and I needed them for introducing myself to everyone that I was making connections with. And so because I didn't have a logo yet, actually the logo that was developed is my hanko, or the stamp that you use instead of a signature. I had this created sort of in my last 6 months of being in Japan. But at first I asked them to put just the word for intention on my business card. And this is what it looks like in the kanji symbols. It's pronounced shiko. And the lower part of this symbol here on the left means heart, and the one on the right means direction. And I would hand my business card out and people would respond saying, oh, this is a very powerful word. And I would say, yes, I think being intentional and purposeful is really important to us. And they said, no, 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 this is a very strong word in Japanese. And I came to see this as how can we connect with, it's about connecting with what's really important inside of our hearts, understanding our purpose, in sort of on the higher level, our purpose in life, or our purpose in an individual moment, but what's most important inside of us. And then how can we align our behavior in our actions to best achieve that purpose. And so we have to be really self-aware of both what's important here inside and also our actions. And some of the biggest disconnect I see when I'm coaching others, and I have observed in myself too, is when we when we have a good intention, a good purpose, something good we want to achieve, but that our actions that we're taking, we're not aware that they actually are not in service. They're not going to truly achieve that purpose. So how, as coaches and leaders, can we create more self-awareness for ourselves on both our purpose in a moment, but also how our actions line up with that? So now we have another little interactive exercise. If we were in person, and some of you have done this with me, I want you to take some sort of piece of paper. It can just be, a little scratch or something, or if you have a big piece of paper, and I want to spend 3 minutes for you drawing things that are important about you or your purpose. And you can use some words to describe this as well. And I'm going to ask you in a moment to share in another Many Mentor some elements of that purpose. But connecting with our purpose is so important. So this being a masterclass, I want you to have a chance to connect a bit with what is important to you, about you, or your purpose. All right, I'm going to set this here. And it seems strange for me to not see you all. Turning my timer on. Okay, about 1 more minute, and then I'm going to start teeing up the mini mentor now. Please keep drawing or reflecting on your purpose. All right. The timer has ended, and I don't know why it didn't have a sound, but it works. So please now go to the mini mentor and enter in a few words or short phrases that describe what you drew about things that are important to yourself or your purpose. And we're going to experiment with having a word cloud come up and see what types of words end up being here. We'll give you a few minutes about this. I think words or clouds are so interesting because we can see where the commonality is coming in. I love seeing the words that are jumping out.
Do you also show us the results, Katie?
Can you see the results?
No.
Oh, you're not seeing. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at. I assumed you're seeing my screen too. I'm looking at the results come in. Apologies. No. Thank you for letting me know. Let's see why.
Even from the previous questions, we didn't see the results.
Sorry. So. Thank you. Yeah, please give me that feedback so that. Okay. Let me see if I can reshare here because it's very interesting. Here we go. And I'll go back and share. Can you see that now? Do you see the word cloud?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I'll go back and share the other things, but
Okay.
really great. And I'll share this afterwards, but look at the words that are popping out. Connection, happiness, learning, development, joy, heart, growth. These are really common, and so they're really about connecting, and there's a real human element, something about the heart and being connected with other people. And no matter where I go, this is a common theme as well. And I think what's also very interesting, if you even do this with a team of yours at work, and everyone then can hold up and share their picture and talk about it, you discover something new and more rich about the people you work with. And it gets us to connect again with our whole person. I've done this remotely with a small group where people, hold up and show their picture and describe it. Sometimes we keep such a separation of like, this is who we are at work and this is who we are at home. But really, we are our whole people, and our purpose, even as leaders and as coaches, is about helping. It has an element of helping people, about developing, about learning, and how important it is for us to keep a connection with that. Yes, we are there to also create value for our customers and to make things, but in the chaos of the moment or the sense of urgency, we can lose sight of this deeper sense of purpose. So I challenge you to think too, how can you always keep sort of a reconnection with this concept of purpose here for yourself. That's not just your purpose in your business world, but your purpose in life as well. And I would love to see some of the things that you drew. I'm going to show you my drawing in one moment because it really is the same thing, but I'm going to go back just so you all can see what the different, so this is what the professional roles were. So we had this is the operational management here. A lot of senior or middle management, and then we have a ton of internal consultants, process improvement, lean consultants, and then some externals, and then this is academia, and then some other as well. And then by far, most people are in the Netherlands, so there we go. All right, well, I'll come back to that, but I really love seeing this word cloud, and I'll share with you. Oop, come on. There we go. So there we go. Connection, happiness, learning, joy, development. That's super wonderful. All right, I'm going to go back, and I think I have to toggle between the two screens. So let's see if I can open my share tray and go back to this. There we go. All right, I'm learning PDCA. And then, all right. So this is a drawing that I did for myself about a year and a little bit, it was June of last year. And my drawing, I would have gotten a little bit more refined, but again, I wanted to share with you my drawing and how you're helping me fulfill my purpose as well. And that the words that I have put here to describe would be very similar to what many of you had here. Connection, intention, joy, travel. I don't know why my family's so small here. But really, I consider myself a person of the world. I've lived in 6 countries, and staying connected with people and helping them develop and learn is really become what I consider my purpose as well. So this is a little bit about me, and you've already learned about Daruma dolls and intention. And I love to ride my bike as well. So I get joy in the Netherlands because I see so many of your wonderful bike lanes, and I'm jealous because we do not support that quite as much here in the United States, but I do a lot of road cycling and some mountain biking as well. So we already did that. I wanted to connect with you too on this metaphor that I used for actually writing the book, which is around a concept of weaving a life of purpose or a leadership concepts of purpose. And this came out to me when I was working on I was writing all the different stories of the book, but trying to think about how to fit them together. And I made a comment to Mr. Yoshino one night saying, I really feel like there are 2 strong threads in your life. One is this really clear vision that you had and perseverance you had to learn English and to go move to the United States, to be someone who had a broader worldview than just staying in Japan. And the other was around developing and helping other people. And he said to me, do you know that there is actually a philosophy in Japan about weaving kimonos, that there are these warp and weft threads. So the warp threads are the ones that are like these threads here are set on the loom, and the weft threads are the ones that are interconnected. And I've come to see this as also a metaphor for how we learn. But so the warp are like the known in this philosophy. They're strong and consistent and represent, in Japanese philosophy, one's inner belief, spirit, and so that should be determination, not determinization. That was me working on this Latin tonight, so apologies, I'll correct that. And the weft are these ones that kind of that get connected in between and sometimes break, or can be of different colors and sizes and strengths. And they're very practical and physical, but they're what actually create the pattern of the fabric. And I see this as something that we can all use to think about our own lives as well, that we all have different goals in our life, but we all have something. You drew it. There's something compelling inside of you that is important here in your heart, that you either a specific goal you want to achieve or something you want to be, that guides you through your life. And it can change a bit, or you discover it, but those are the real firm things. And then the other elements are what you discover about how you can make that happen, and how you're learning from failure and from success. And how we can look back in our lives and see how these two things intersect as well together to really shape our purpose and who we are as people and as leaders. And so I tell the story on two dimensions. One is Mr. Yoshino's desire and pursuit of his goal to live in the United States. And then the second are the elements that he learned about learning to lead and leading to learn. And so I want you to just keep this in your mind as well, about what are the things you know about yourself and what are the things you have been discovering about yourself, and how to live your life, and the things that you want to change and adjust, and what maybe your fabric is looking like at this point in your life. And we'll come back to the concept of reflection later. So I want to shift a bit now and talk about these concepts of learning and leading, and specifically some stories and experiences that Mr. Yoshino had at Toyota that illuminate to me principles that I always knew, but were just so powerful in his story and experience as well. And he made a comment to me, and I think this is really, really important. We always are trying to look about what's the secret of Toyota? How are they so successful? Why is lean, like, how can we make other companies lean? And he said to me one time, there is no secret. Well, he said, well, actually, maybe the only secret to Toyota is its attitude towards learning. It's not about the tools. It's not about the techniques. It's not about the Ono circle. It's not the value stream maps. Those are all important things that helped enable learning and improvement in their organization. So if we go back to the fundamentals, it's about how do we learn more effectively as individuals, and then how do we foster a culture of learning in our organization so that we're developing capability and confidence and at all levels for problem solving and distributing that concept of creativity across our organizations. And this requires us to give space for learning and for failure as well. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have here in the West. And also, just important to remember that Toyota is not perfect by any means, but that they really have this, they've created this habit of learning and reflection and adjustment. So I'm gonna dial back in time, and again, please put comments in the chat function. So I'm gonna dial back in time. Some of you have heard this before, and this quote. The very first time that I met Mr. Yoshino, actually it was a day before I met Mr. Yoshino at that conference in Long Beach in 2014. He was on stage with John Shook, and this is a photo from that conference in 2014. And he said many things that struck me as profound, and a few things that really helped destroy any preconceived notion I had that all Japanese senseis were very rigid and stern. He was telling some funny stories up on stage, including how John Shook had called him the day before while he was in a rental car, driving around looking for a Walmart to buy some underwear because he had forgotten to pack his underwear. So I knew he was a jovial, funny guy who led with the heart and also led with the mind. And he said this this comment to me, and I see this as really the foundation and the essence of leadership, that his role as a leader, as a manager, was to develop his subordinate, John, in this case, by giving him a mission or target and supporting him while he figured out how to reach that target. And as he was developing John, he was aware he was developing himself as well as a leader. And it really struck me as quite profound. And I've taken this to see these are the real essential functions of a people-centered leader in service of developing a learning culture. Set the direction, provide support, and develop yourself. So I'm going to share a few concepts under each of these, as well as ask you to reflect on your own actions and behaviors around this. So the first is setting the direction. And so critical for leaders to provide a challenge, set a direction, or even a target, depending on at what level we're solving problems for. I find when I work in organizations, ask people to define a problem, they have a really hard time doing this if we go back to say what a true problem equation is, because they don't know the target or the real direction or challenge that we are going after. And this is a leader's responsibility in telling, of not just being authoritarian, but really setting that direction and being clear on the target. The problem equation is very, very simple. Target minus actual equals the problem is the gap we're trying to close. I work with a lot of people who are, going to the Gemba, going to the workplace, collecting information on what's actually happening, which is fantastic. But when they need to actually define what the problem is, they say, I don't actually know what the target should be. And so this is our responsibility. For those of you in an operational leadership role, this is your responsibility to help define what the target is. If you're the senior executive, what's the biggest direction that we need to be moving in? How are we going to align our people? If you're in a subgroup, middle or lower level management, what for your group is the specific target or general target that people should be moving for? How should things actually be happening? But Yoshino also cautions that a practical style is more important than precision, because it's about getting back to this concept of learning. Sometimes on the other end of the spectrum, instead of not having a clear a target or direction, we spend so much time trying to get incredibly precise that we don't move forward. So it's important to have the direction and then experiment our way towards greater precision in our target. He was telling a story, and this is in the book, about how one time, when he was leading the training program to teach the American General Motors employees who were part of the NUMMI plant, when it was the first joint venture between General Motors and Toyota in the 1980s, when Toyota was seeking to expand globally. The Americans were coming to Japan to learn about the Toyota way and the Toyota production system, and he didn't have a clear target. So he created sort of a general target of, where did people have something specific that they were going to take back after 3 weeks to implement or practice when they went back to the United States, and their level of happiness and satisfaction with the program. And he said he was laughing because these were not like super precise targets, but at least it gave him and his team direction and a sense of knowing how they were assessing success. And as they ran the programs, they got a little more specific in that as well. So again, it's about setting direction, but not letting that be a barrier to moving forward in learning. And also, he has talked to me about how targets should be determined by what is needed, not by what is achievable. I don't know if this is the same case for you in the Netherlands, but I have been on the boards of other hospitals and organizations, or when I have been a process improvement consultant as well, and there was a lot of discussion on the leadership team of what what should our target be, especially around maybe patient safety, like, okay, maybe what is the acceptable level of infections or, of this year? The target should always be 0, or the challenge should be 0. And that is what our patients or our customers need. We can then iterate and try and move towards that. But we should be setting targets by what is needed, not by what is achievable, because it might be a bonus for the leadership team and they know that they can achieve it. So sometimes think about how your systems and structures in your organization might be impeding the challenge towards moving towards better because of rewards and structures that are put in place. And he talks about how it's really important to set these seemingly impossible goals, because it allows you to push yourself and learn from the lessons of not reaching your targets. And that's what makes you smarter and go further. Now, of course, we need to have intermediary targets and things along the way so we feel like we're making progress. But think about, for yourself and your organization, how are targets and goals set? And are they really challenging us to really take a leap forward? Or are we really just taking small incremental improvement and being okay with that? Yes, continuous improvement is very important, but again, we need to be moving towards that challenge. For those of you who practice Toyota Kata, this is that same concept of the challenge is up here, and then you can set step-by-step smaller targets to get there. And this is really what's embedded in the Toyota mindset. So one of the things we want to be doing as leaders and as coaches is to be creating this learning organization where people think and take responsibility for problem solving. Yet so often we find that that is not happening. And I'm curious to know from you, and I would ask this in a group, what are some of the barriers in your organization that keep people from thinking or we're taking responsibility for problem solving, for creativity? I'm going to move over to the Many Mentor and start seeing what some of your responses are here. One moment, I gotta. And stop sharing and open share. Yeah, it's a fear of failure, knowledge, and I'm assuming it's like ability, time, fear for change, budget, fear for failure, disconnected leadership in the work floor, no time, a lot of fear coming out. Fear, failure, fear for change, short-term focus on your plate, failure. Yeah, these are all, it might lead to even more work. Yep, it's like you put up your hand, there's a problem here, and then, okay, great, you're responsible for that now. Lack of a vision, yes, this gets back to an organization not having a clear direction or target. Yep, the goal is not clear, management's not supported. It's a management problem, not mine. So putting all of, like, managers should be solving all the problems. Yep. These are fear for change. Yeah, there's so many great things in here. Yeah, so this concept of fear is really coming out here. And when I have this conversation with groups, this always comes up, that people have a fear of failure, a fear from being blamed. And I'm going to talk about this in one moment, how this is so important, our responses as leaders, and how do we create this space for people to experiment and learn. And one thing around that is, how do we not have risk on the highest level, like it's something that's going to touch our customers or it's going to be so big. How do we start learning and experimenting on a smaller scale so that it allows for, it's not a big deal if there's failure. Leading to more work. One of the things that I think is really interesting here that came up too is that expecting managers to be the ones solving the problem. So it was saying, and don't see the purpose, but kind of looking and expecting for our managers and our leaders to be solving the problems. And that is often a result of a habit that we have developed as leaders and people for what I consider to be one of the biggest reasons that people are not, that inhibits problem solving and learning. All of these things are super important as well, especially this concept around fear. And I would encourage you to think about or work with your leadership teams as well and thinking about why are people having this fear in your organization, because this is going to be such a barrier to problem solving and to thinking. So I'm going to share the slides again. Thank you for sharing that. I would love to have a rich discussion. So maybe at the end too, we can come back to this concept around the barriers in your organization. And I'd love to hear from you, some of your thoughts on that as well. All right, are we back to the slides? All right, oops. Oop. So again, I want to put this out to you, and we have this scale as people on telling versus asking, or advocating versus inquiry, and they're both great and important ways to show up. But I'm curious to know for you, what do you think our usual habit is as humans? And again, it's hard because I have to keep going between the many mentor, but this is the next, many mentor here. Oop. Oh, what? Sorry, this went to the very end. No. Okay. What is on the scale of telling versus asking? And I think they put 0 is on the telling and 10 is on the asking. There's not like one's better than the other, but it's just to do the scale. What, as humans, what do you think is our default habit in most situations? Telling or asking? I'm not seeing this one coming up. All right, well, we'll come back to that. I would say, so my answer is overwhelmingly, our habit as humans is more often than not to show up as telling. We do have habits for inquiry. I'm not sure why that's not working, but that's all right. We'll come back to that. Slideshow. There we go. Is we have an imbalance as leaders and as people that we tend to show up telling more often than asking. And again, as I said earlier, telling is very important as leaders. We need to set that direction. But then when we come in and always tell people what to do, we create this culture where people expect us to have all of the answers, and maybe they are not coming forward with ideas or creativity for problem solving, that either we're afraid that we're going to be shut down. So maybe that gets to some of the fear that you all suggested in the previous slides, or we're just telling people what to do, and it creates this sense of lack of ownership or buy-in because you're just being told what to do. You're not being invited in to help be part of the solution. So we as leaders, we wear many hats, and sometimes we're experts where we're coming in and have deep content knowledge. But when we come in and tell people what to do all the time, we actually end up owning the problem. So here on the left, when you're the expert in telling people what to do in a certain area, you end up owning the problem, which is totally appropriate when there is like a technical issue, or we're giving somebody the problem solving ownership, the responsibility to solve that problem. But as we are promoted into leadership roles, our responsibility is not just to be solving the technical problem, but to be developing and coaching other people to be solving the problems and being more creative at their level of the organization. And we don't want to be the bottleneck. If we're the coach or the consultant who's coming in and giving the answers as well, we end up owning the problem. So we need to create a better balance. And again, this goes back to the concept of intention. When is it my role and to own the problem? When is it my responsibility to be telling? And then telling is the right thing to be doing. But when our responsibility is for coaching or to be developing other people, sorry, my 6-year-old's coming in here. No, thank you right now. No, thank you. I'll be with you in about a half an hour. Okay, so this is real time when I'm the only adult. Jack? So then this is where I'm going to be more telling and not asking right now, being very directive. Do not bother me while I'm teaching my class. But to show up and asking more questions. And again, there's elements of coaching that also is about teaching and telling and instructing. So it's not 100% always about asking questions, but we need to be balancing who's owning the problems in our organization and be aware of when are we there as the expert and when are we there to develop other people's capability. And we wear different hats throughout the day and even one meeting to the next. Our purpose and role in that moment might change. And so how are we connecting with, how are we really going to be best aligning our actions with what is needed in that moment? A learning organization also requires these technical and social capabilities. And so, about problem solving and coaching for problem solving. And again, this is the difference between the expert and the social elements that are required for teaching and developing and coaching other people. And as leaders and as coaches, we have to balance these as well. So for example, Mr. Yoshino will talk about how is he helping develop other people's capability, but also allowing them to experience and learn the technical capabilities of problem solving, of doing an A3, of doing Hoshin, of applying process thinking. At the same time, how are you developing the skills for developing other people? And as leaders, we also need to balance this concept of challenge and nurture. So how do we push people into the discomfort of learning? Because learning and struggle is where the learning happens, but with the support that people know that we're looking at them and we're helping them, and we're not going to let, throwing them in the deep end of the pool before they have learned how to swim, so that we're there really understanding what is their level of capability and helping build up their confidence so that they're able to move forward to different challenges as well. So we need both challenge and nurture. We need telling and asking, and we need technical and social. And this is where leadership and coaching is an art, not just a science. So on this concept of the leader, yes.
May I just ask a question?
Yes.
You said, well, managers, they have to set a target. That's one of the most important things of the managers. But when they set a target, they should tell it to the employees. And probably in many cases, it's not a challenge. It's not the target of the employees, of the subordinates. So that's a little bit of a problem. How to cope with that?
Yeah, so I would say that this is it's ultimately that you can get leaders and managers should be getting input from their staff on what are the challenges what's actually going on, get their input onto it. But ultimately, it is the leader's decision to what direction do we need to go. It's not always consensus driven. This is part of the leader's role, is to say, this is where we need to go. Now, how can I help support you in our group to move forward to that? Of course, getting input into making that decision is something that is valuable and helpful. So it's not just making a decision and setting a target in a vacuum without other input. But ultimately, when I've observed too, where leaders have said, or managers have said, well, let's just figure out, let's let the team decide what target should be. No, the target should be set on what the customers need, what we need to be doing to create that value, what should be happening, and then we can add the collective energy around how we're going to achieve that.
Okay. So what you're basically saying, well, the target is set by the customer, but it's communicated with your employees, with your team.
Yes, or the target should be set on what is needed, what is needed for the organization, what is needed to achieve whatever the purpose of your organization is, not just what is achievable. Of course, getting input and buy-in and communication is really important, but the leader's responsibility is ultimately saying, this is the way we're going. This is now, let's get in alignment, let's move in that. It's not up for every individual to set the organizational direction. But of course, input is very important. So again, it's this concept of asking and telling. You ask for input, but ultimately the leader has to make a decision and say, this is where we're going. And so there are many different ways then to provide support and I consider this support to provide for creating the organizational environment that allows for learning, that allows people to grow and develop, and that we're supporting each person. And again, how are we creating the organizational structures that allow leaders and managers to support their groups? I see so many times in like a healthcare organization where maybe a nurse manager has 100 direct reports. Well, that's not reasonable to think that they're going to be able to coach each person and provide that real support to each individual. So how are we creating those structures in our organization that allow for greater support for people? And again, our role as leaders and coaches is not to develop other people, but to create the opportunities and the experiences that allow other people allow the people to develop themselves. So we can't create learning for other people, but we can help them reflect, to learn, to experiment, to practice, and to hold up the mirror for themselves. So one way I see this happening is setting the conditions for success, and also leadership taking the responsibility for when mistakes happen. And this is so powerful. This gets back to this concept of fear that many of you said earlier. And Mr. Yoshino had this really incredible story, actually many stories throughout his years of Toyota, some that were smaller and some that were bigger. You know, at the end of his career, and we go into this in great depth, a big failure and many mistakes along the way that resulted in a failed business venture for Toyota. But how can we as leaders and managers create a culture where people are not afraid of making mistakes? And by making mistakes, it's not about massive things. It could be just little things as well. Though there's a story that he tells all the time. Many of you have probably heard it, about how when he's like 22 years old, coming out of university, he joined Toyota, and orientation, he was assigned to the paint shop. He was going to have a desk role, but he needed to go to the Gemba to learn how to make cars. And he was supposed to pour in different a solvent and a paint together into a big vat that would then get sprayed onto the cars. And the manager of the paint shop, or the car shop, came running in saying the paint wasn't sticking to about 100 cars and they would have to be repainted. Well, the manager of the paint shop, instead of just yelling at him, and Mr. Yoshino was Yoshino-kun, young Yoshino at that time, was really worried about if he was going to be blamed for this mistake, and he knew it was his fault. But they asked him to demonstrate how he had, what he had done, and they realized that the paint cans were very poorly labeled. They look exactly the same, and so it was so easy for him to make the mistake. And not only did they not get mad at him, they thanked him for making the mistake, because it gave them the opportunity to improve the workplace and ensure that it didn't happen again by creating better labels and maybe some standard work as well. So how can we have this mindset? I think back to my own experiences and how we're so often, we jump to blame. And how can we hold back and instead look at processes instead of just blaming the person? And and this happen in small instances all the time. And how can we allow for a little bit of mistakes and also take ownership for creating an environment that doesn't where people are not going to make mistakes as much? And again, it's the same thing at the end of Mr. Yoshino's career after this failed business venture that lost $13 million for Toyota. The chairman of the company thanked Mr. Yoshino and said, the failure is not solely your responsibility, it's our responsibility as well, because there are things that we didn't do to set you up for success and to support you in this. So really, really important for how can we create this culture where it's okay to make mistakes. That was an error, and also make mistakes and some failures along the learning pathway as well. Also, so important to teach the process of learning. So again, this asking versus telling is not just giving people the answer, but allowing them to have opportunities to learn for themselves. And this challenges us to be okay with not having people have the right answer immediately, that we need to give a little bit of space and time and not treat everything as an emergency that has to be fixed now. There are, of course, emergencies or critical things that must be fixed now, and so we have to put all our energy and go back into maybe more of a telling mode. But how do we create that process of learning? There's this great story that Mr. Yoshino shared about maybe he was in his early 30s and he was now in the Tokyo office and he was asked to prepare a report. And he had known from his time working in Toyota City the importance of going to Gemba or going to the workplace, going to actually talk to real people and validate and gather facts. But he felt like he didn't have the time in this case. And so he just went to the library and created a summary A3 document and supplementary materials. And he went to go present his report to that he called the big boss of the Tokyo office. And then the boss said, well, who did you go talk to? And he said, oh, I was so busy, I didn't have a chance. I just went to the library. The boss said, time out. You cannot continue. I'm going to give you one more week. And then I want you to go and talk to other people and then come back and prepare your report or present your report. Well, Mr. Yoshino did that and he didn't find anything different. He went out and interviewed a few of the other companies he was looking to get some information from. And he was a little, he was like, oh, I had to do all this extra effort. But later he learned that the boss was not expecting any different content in the output of the report. What he was more interested in was developing the capabilities for learning and teaching Mr. Yoshino the process of proper thinking, of this is how to do completeness of thinking, this is what you do. And so he was more focused on teaching him the process than really what was going to impact the outcome. And so think about that for yourself too. How are you creating these conditions for learning, the process for learning, and what ultimately how that is going to contribute to greater creativity and greater knowledge across your organization than if you were just telling people exactly what to do or focused on the outcome. And then, yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Perhaps, well, we got a question here. You're telling a nice story. It's a good story, but it also shows that you can only learn good if there is a good organization culture. And I'm not sure if I'm asking the question. Robert Jan does have a question, so perhaps you can go a little bit about the link between organization culture and learning as a manager. Is it possible to learn as a manager and to stimulate learning if there is not a learning culture in your organization?
So I challenge you to think about that too. We may not be able to influence all of the organization, but we have an ability to influence the people around us. So if you are the manager of a team of people, how are you showing up to help foster learning with the people who report to you? And you might be dealing with other pressures, but where are those spaces that you can take 5 more minutes to let someone think, ask a few more questions, and create that space? And so sometimes we all, and I've had this experience before too, we feel stuck because the culture of our organization isn't, is different than how we're wanting to show up. But we still have ownership of the group that we're working with and the people we interact with. Or if you're a process improvement coach, how are you showing up a little bit differently to not be going in as the expert problem solver, but also in the mode of how am I helping the other people think about problems? How am I teaching and sharing that knowledge as well? But of course, it really, ultimately, it does need to come from the top, but we can still influence and create change and learning within our own sphere of influence as well.
Yeah, perhaps Robert Jan, he asked the question about culture. I'm not sure whether or not the answer is already given. Robert Jan, perhaps if you want to ask the question, it's fine. Then you have to put on your video.
Okay. Hi.
Wait.
Thanks for letting me ask the question. So it's very interesting. When I'm hearing the stories, I'm thinking about the Japanese economic model, about maybe also the model that's working in the United States, the Anglo-Saxon model. Where we are here in Northern Europe, we have a approach that is a little bit different. So we have more a long-term focus, a lot of SMEs, so small companies. We do also have, of course, large corporates, but the approach is a little bit different. So I was listening to you, and lean, how does it tie? So the lean model or the Toyota model, I see a lot of companies using it already, but I'm thinking, is this still something that is that ties? How can we tie it into our economic model? Can these models learn from each other? Because a company is, we are focusing at the company level, right? So, but the company is in a broader network, in a system. So what do you expect for the future? How can we learn from the current developments as well?
That's a big question, and maybe one that would take a lot more. Well, let's come back to that. But I think that's a really it's a question worthy of discussion. I'd like to hear some other. But I would say, just to consider that one of the things I think is important is how do we get back? How do we not get as focused on the tools, or is this a lean system? How do we get back to the fundamentals of leadership about if we are truly, no matter if we're a small, medium, or large company within a huge corporation, how do we influence the people we directly engage with, and how can we shift the culture that way and set the expectations? And certainly if you are at the senior leadership level, you have a much greater responsibility in how you're then bringing that down. There are stories Mr. Yoshino has in here too, like he worked with he was assigned to this group in human resources when he came back from the United States, and he did a dramatic, as a leader, he created these amazing learning opportunities. It's a really special story. He was there for 10 months, and he had an incredible impact on developing his people by small things that he did every day, as well as some big things such as getting 22 tickets for people to travel internationally. It's a really wonderful story, and there's some good things. But so I think it can be easy for us to say it's too hard or it's everyone else's responsibility. So I challenge all of us to think about how can we show up a little bit differently to help start influencing this culture of change. Okay. So I didn't quite answer your question, but it's a big one. Can we come back to that? I want to make sure I've finished the content. Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm happy to have more discussion and later too. So if we're not, so that's great. Thank you. And we're almost to the end of the more formal presentation. So, okay. Okay, good. So I think I shared the process of learning. And then one of the most important things, and this gets back to this asking versus telling, is sometimes we get so, and I find this myself, I want to help, but I'm so excited to be problem solving myself, or I'm impatient, or I feel like a sense of urgency. I know when I was leading a large team of internal continuous improvement consultants, I felt so much pressure about all the things I needed to get done every day that sometimes I lost sight of my true intention of helping the other people who are working with me solve the problems. And so or like explore ideas and to learn. And so we have to be so just connect again with this sense of curiosity and knowing that we don't have all the right answers. And we have to be okay with giving people some space for learning and not being right immediately. And this can be so hard to do, and it requires great intention on our behalf as parents, as coaches, as leaders, so that people are having that experience of learning. And it's not about the end result all the time. I know we are busy corporations and companies, but where are those times that we can allow for a little bit more learning? And again, this gets back to developing yourself. And I do want to give time for questions. So I have a few slides, and then we'll challenge you to reflect for yourself, and then about how you are continuing to learn. And again, this gets back to Yoshino's comment here is he had this lifetime of learning and this real passion for learning. And so how do we stop being right all the time and really embrace this concept of curiosity and growing and developing ourselves? And I have found that as I have grown in my career and in my life, that the bigger challenge than learning content and becoming an expert in, say, a content field has been developing others. And by developing others has challenged me to really look at my own behavior as sort of an expert problem solver, and how that needs to shift to really being much more coach-like in helping other people solve problems and learn and develop, because that's really what's my passion about, connecting with people, about helping them. And so how am I aligning those skills? So I'm going to share three things that have been really helpful for me in doing this. One is taking an intention pause. It could be 30 seconds before going into a meeting or an interaction. Again, this is where we're wearing so many hats that sometimes maybe we need to be more telling and more directive. Other times we're there to help coach or develop someone else. So connecting with what is my purpose in this interaction, and what are the actions I need to take to best align with that purpose. And it can help ground us and stop being as reactive in the moment and more proactive in how we are acting. The second is to pay attention to the quality of your questions. This is a funny animal. It is a wolf dressed up like a sheep. Oftentimes we think we are asking questions, but we are really asking fake questions. We are telling people our ideas, but dressing it up as a question. Like, what if you tried my idea? Have you done X, Y, and Z? What about my idea here? Why don't you try something else? All of these things are more closed-ended, could be answered yes or no. You're putting in options for people, or you're doing a providing a suggestion. These are not true questions asked for the intent of helping somebody else think. So if you catch yourself doing this, be honest with yourself and the other person that you are providing an idea or a suggestion rather than disguising it as a question. If you ask something starting in English, at least with what or how, it tends to more likely be a true sort of humble inquiry question asked to help the other person. And I will provide this link later. I have a really, what can be a helpful question guide that goes into more depth about asking questions. And the corollary for asking questions about listening openly, not just with open ears, but with open eyes, so to see the whole person. And this is really important in our virtual world as well. So how are we seeing and connecting with what's going on? With an open mind, so not making assumptions about what's going on from our previous experience or what the other person is thinking, and with an open heart. So seeing the person as their whole person, and sometimes checking in just how they're doing. Again, really important in our virtual world here as well. And then getting back to this concept of failure, that failure isn't failure if you learn something important that you could never have learned elsewhere. And this gets back to not just Toyota's mentality about failure, but Mr. Yoshino's mentality around failure as well. And how we have to know that learning is never perfect and it's never complete. It's this ongoing cycle. So how are we being intentional about learning each day? And how are we developing wisdom for ourselves? Not just continuous improvement and not just knowledge, but deeper wisdom. And there's a story that I won't share right now, but in the end of the book, that something I learned from Mr. Yoshino about the true meaning behind the Toyota Way pillars of continuous improvement and respect for people, and that we had some elements lost in translation. And the word wisdom is part of what got lost. We just called it continuous improvement, but it's really wisdom and improvement. So how do we create wisdom that's ongoing? So I want you to set your intention about what is one thing that you'll practice with intention to improve yourself as a leader or as a coach. And you can go put this in menti.com as well, and I'll share the slides as we go into discussion. And then there's another, I'm going to share with you too about how you can create a habit of daily intentional reflection, because again, this concept of declaring your intention, having your plan for your actions and reflecting on this each day can be incredibly powerful. This is a very simple tool that my friend Karen Ross and I use in our coaching communities. You can create your own notebook for this, but creating that habit of reflection and setting an intention it can be transformative for yourself and then transformative for you and your organizations as well. And then I'll have one more Menti code, and I'll have these both up so that we can move into questions. But what is one word that best describes your experience of today's masterclass? And it could be a phrase too, but one word. So go into the Mentis and both declare what's one thing you're going to practice and one word that best describes your experience of today's masterclass. And again, I have you can get in touch with me. I'm happy to have more conversations, and there are different ways that you can continue to practice and learn. Karen Ross and I offer different coaching communities and would love to welcome you to that as well. But we can have more conversation now, and we have about 10 minutes for questions. So I'm going to shift off. Again, please describe your one word and what you are going to practice with intention. And I will shift, and I'll share those at the very end. But I'm going to shift over to any questions right now so that Jannes can facilitate that. Oh, you're on mute.
Do we need to use Mentimeter now?
Yeah, so use the Mentimeter, and I'll share that in a moment, what the answers are. So reflect for yourself on what is one thing that you're going to practice with intention, and then what is one word that describes your experience of today's masterclass. But we can also move forward and having some discussion if people want to ask some questions while you are still filling out the Mentimeter, and I'll share that at the very end.
Okay. Okay. So if there are questions, please lift a hand, put it in the chat. You know, I've got a little question. You know, it's many times a manager is focused on well, economic results, shorter lead times, yep. Efficiency, better results. He's also, his target is clear. He got his targets from his boss. But the employees, the members of the team, they have basically a different target. And their targets are to have a social, pleasant environment, to socialize, to talk about their caravan and to talk about their holiday. You know, they want to have a pleasant environment. They have a different target. And in such a situation, how to be human-centered? You know, should we talk then about the caravan? Should we? Well,
I don't see it as an either or. So it's we are at work to because we're there to help the organization achieve some sort of purpose for our customers, and that needs to be clearly communicated, and so that each person also has an understanding as how does my individual role as a one person connect up to my team's purpose and then to the greater purpose or target of the organization? And how do we meet people as their whole people? Yes, we should be connecting, again, asking questions and getting to know people, and we are a whole people. So I think it's both. It's about providing that challenge and that clear direction, but also the support, the nurture. I consider the nurture about creating a good team dynamic, about knowing that we aren't just here, we're not just workers, but we have our whole people. But being clear in expectations on, you know, for your organization, is it when we're at work, we, you know, during the hours that we're producing something, we need to be focused on work, but then break time, yeah, let's have fun, or let's have some other opportunities. So how do we create clear expectations, but also how do we have fun and create joy and happiness in our environment? You know, that is so important as well. So it's all of that. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
Okay, so you're saying, well, and joy and pleasure and having a good atmosphere is utmost important.
Yeah.
But also you need to. It's important for the manager to try to connect the employee to the purpose of the whole organization.
Absolutely, yes.
And I believe, I'm not sure what the experience is of all the people, but I think in many cases there is a problem. People, well, they are hired. Many people do not know the purpose of their own organization.
Right.
They are hired for a simple task, and they only work because they get money, and they are not connected to the purpose of the organization. They are for their own career. Is that also your experience? I'm also curious about the experience of others, but what's your experience?
Well, I have different experiences, but absolutely, when I think going back to this is why we started with purpose as well. Going back to even purpose as an organization, what is the purpose of the organization, and then how is that articulated and communicated so that everybody really understands that? So if we were to do this exercise for the senior most leaders of an organization, I'd say the same thing. Draw what's your company's purpose? Draw it. How are you connecting also with people's hearts? And being very clear, it's not just all about like the 100 operational metrics that we have. What's the real purpose, and how does that connect? I think, you know, I think back to, I'm forgetting the name of the company, but it was a seatbelt manufacturer that had in Utah, Utah, the United States, and they came down to that their purpose was we save lives. And then everyone was able to connect on that, all different, you know, from the people who, you know, sweep the floor, like what I'm doing is helping create a safe environment so that people can manufacture seatbelts so that we can save lives. And so what is that connection to the heart so that it really resonates with people?
Yeah, I think like a goal like being number one in a certain area, I think that's probably a little bit of poor purpose, eh?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that would be an assessment. Maybe for some groups that's, you know, that's enough, but I'd say yes, that would be, that's an outcome rather than a purpose.
Yeah, I got a question. Ivo got a question.
Okay, I'm just sharing.
How do I coach? And the question is, how do I coach an impatient manager to ask questions to her team, and then be patient to let the employees learn?
That's a great question. Well, one thing that I learned, and this is a healthcare example, actually, I learned from one of my coaches, that she was working with a nurse executive who was exactly in that same position. And it's hard because especially in healthcare and other organizations, people are promoted for having deep expertise and they have a lot of experience. So the coach, helped this nurse executive could own her expertise, but come up with a way that she was going to practice. So she would say, I have 30 years of experience in nursing. I've seen many similar situations, but I don't know what's happening right here in this situation. And then she had her back pocket question of, please tell me what's happening here. And then it gave her the opportunity to hear what the other person was thinking, rather than her just jumping in and telling, oh, I've seen this 100 times before, you know, just go do this. They may have come up with that idea, but she can then have that space. So helping someone see that they can still own their expertise and ask questions to help other people think. Another example, another thing that I have done to help not just healthcare leaders, but other leaders too, is as the coach, I will write verbatim, word for word, what the leader is saying and hand that back as evidence for them to have evidence of what they said. And they may start being shocked. They may think they're asking more questions, but that they're actually telling. So there are ways you can help that person both own their expertise, but ask more questions as well.
Yeah. Okay, Katie, we have only limited, we have only a few minutes. Did you get answers on the?
Yep, is it not showing? Oh, sorry, I thought I was.
Not yet.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was asking, sorry, I thought I was showing, open the share tray. I thought I was showing the Manymeter, okay. Is it showing the Manymeter?
Not yet.
It's not?
Not yet, and also some people did have, Mariella got that problems, but I think many people, okay.
Do you see it?
Listen, yes, I see it.
Okay.
Listen and asking questions.
Yep. Asking more patience. Mr. Yoshino has a great quote too. Being patient requires a lot of patience. So it's patience is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
I think for me the most difficult thing is not to tell what to do.
Yes.
But yeah, now it's a few minutes. We have only a few minutes left. So I have to tell what to do.
Well, yes.
So we have to finish. We have to finish the masterclass in a few minutes. And if people leave, please use the evaluation form, which is in the meeting chat, to give some feedback.
And I will share the slides with Jannes, and they will distribute. Han will distribute the PDF of the slides, and then you can get the coaching. There'll be the link for the coaching handout for asking questions there too, which may be of value and help for you.
Well, thank you, Katie. I think you gave a lot of information, and it went fast. There's a lot to digest for us. So thank you very much for that. I think you also show, and I think made several people a little bit interested in reading the book and to more carefully read what's going on and what were the stories of Yoshino. And interesting in the book is also that he was involved in the Hoshin Kanri, so how to get a community within a company, how Toyota does it. And there's a chapter about Hoshin Kanri. There's a chapter about Kanpro, so the management development program. There's a chapter about NAMI, which is also very useful. So there are several important elements, what happens and important happenings at Toyota, what's all described in the book. So I stimulate all the people to purchase the book when available. I think through Amazon it's available. I would like to give you the last word, Katie. Thank you very much. But if you want to say another thing, one thing, please.
You're welcome. You know, and thank you. And my purpose today was not to share all the stories from the book. But really the concepts that I think are so important around creating a learning organization. And I do encourage you to read the richness of Mr. Yoshino's stories and experiences that can really bring a lot of examples to the concepts that I talked today, and may address some of the questions you have too about how do you do this as a leader, at either on a small level or in a very large complex organization, and at all levels of leadership. So I'm looking forward to having more sessions and welcome you to stay connected with me as well. So thank you so much for attending, and always thank you to Jannes and for Han for being such a wonderful partner and collaborator with Mr. Yoshino and myself. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope we will remain collaboration.
Oh, we will.
Thank you.
Me too. Goodbye,
okay. Well,
have
everybody,
a evening. Take care.
Everybody have a good evening and a good day.
Yes.